Now, the South African Reserve Bank Monetary Policy Committee meeting will announce its interest rate decision on Thursday. Now, when the group last met, the impact of the firing of Finance Minister Nene was heavy on their minds. Now, the currency was still at near record low levels to the US dollar, and the drought had started to affect food inflation. Here's Angelo Coppola with more.
The currency remains weak. The drought has affected food inflation, and Eskom won a tariff increase that will affect administered prices, which feed directly into inflationary pressure. Meanwhile, the Reserve Bank is playing their cards close to their chests.
We will assess all the new data that has become available since our last meeting and information that we've received, and based on our collective judgment of how that may need to inform or help us decide whether the current monetary policy stance continues to be appropriate.
You need to look after the value of the rand relative to the cost of goods in the country. In other words, you need to manage inflation. And second, associated to this, you have to look after the value of the currency relative to other currencies. So I think an appropriate policy stance on the part of the South African Reserve Bank is to defend the currency.
And yet the Reserve Bank maintains that their focus is on inflation and that the currency's weakness is not a consideration when they make their decision.
Basically, the rand has been, bobbing up and down between 15 rand and 16 rand to the dollar. So I don't think that's an additional factor for the MPC. I think what they will be concerned about, though, is the fact that the currency is not yet showing signs of strengthening, and it's still incredibly weak against the dollar.
Moody's, the ratings agency, is in South Africa at the moment, doing a review of the country's economic condition. It's holding talks with the Treasury officials and the Finance Minister, as well as other stakeholders. But can the MPC send any kind of signal to the agencies?
The Reserve Bank is part of the whole process, but I think there's very little that they can do at this stage to A, placate the ratings agencies, and B, help South Africa avoid a downgrade.
Given the clear, unequivocal mandate on the MPC and the South African Reserve Bank to look after the currency, I think they have to hike. So I'll say 25 points.
Inflation is on the increase and likely to touch 7% this year, it's suggested. And if that's the case, the MPC's got some tough calls to make. I'm Angelo Coppola for CCTV in Sandton, Johannesburg.
Now let's head to Egypt, where its Monetary Policy Committee is expected to raise interest rates tomorrow following the central bank's decision to devalue the currency early this week. Now, the country has been facing a foreign currency shortage since the 2011 uprising, and reserves also more than halved from 2011 to $16.5 billion in February. Now, since taking over in November, Central Bank Governor Tariq Amir has taken measures to defend the pound. The MPC hiked interest rates by about 50 basis points in December, citing inflationary pressures, but kept it stable at 9.25% in January as it tried to balance inflationary pressures with the need to stimulate the economy. Now, annual urban consumer inflation eased for the second consecutive month to 9.1% in February from 10.1% in January. Now, to give us more insight into tomorrow's decision, we are now joined by Sufi Abdullah in Cairo. He's, of course, an economic consultant with the Egyptian cabinet. Mr. Sufi, welcome to the show. Now, of course, with the devaluation of the currency, a rise in inflation is inevitable. Do you expect to see the MPC adopting a much more hawkish approach this time around?
Already the prices have gone up between 20 and 30%. So we expect the inflation this year will be much more than 10%. And the reason for the problems we are facing now is a decision made by the Minister of Trade and Manufacturing. That was 2 months ago. He decided to raise what we call non-tariff barriers to imports for reducing imports and to curtail the demand for the dollar. And as you have seen yourself and everybody, the demand has increased and the prices have gone up. This is a very serious problem because the decision was made at the same time. Many traders and importers were not consulted, and as a result they started like kind of a war between them and the government. What we are watching now is not an economical issue, because the Egyptian pound should be much stronger than what we are witnessing. It is basically a fight between big importers and the Ministry of Trade and Manufacturing.
Well, Mr. Aboutaleb, some experts are skeptical about the central bank's commitment to following through with this devaluation. Do you think the regulator is open to devaluing Egypt's pound further if necessary going forward?
Well, the Egyptian pound was devaluated before several times, and nothing happened. The chronic illness of the Egyptian economy are not tackled with. Whether you devalue it or not, you are really hurting the poor people. The rich and the big business are not suffering at all. So unless the government pursue wise policy for incentives, that is to make the manufacturing much easier than trade. This is by easing licensing of small enterprises. The solution is very simple and it is very clear, but the government unfortunately is hesitant or unwilling to go through what we can think of the right way. They're going through the violent way.
Well, Mr. Aboutaleb, sorry to interject there.
What we're witnessing.
Sorry to interject there, but in that case, what can we expect in terms of the government strategy to curb the rise of inflation? Because, of course, like you're saying, that's what's going to really impact the man on the streets in Egypt.
It's very clear. What we are witnessing is not economics. What we are witnessing is monopoly, people trying to force the government or actually bring down the government of President Sisi. What we are witnessing, if I am in the United States, what they are doing right now, these people in playing with the dollar and the Egyptian pound, manipulation of dollar Egyptian pound, is illegal. If I'm in America, these people would have been arrested by now. What we are witnessing is not economics, my friend. It is basically a war to bring down the government of President Sisi.
Well, unfortunately, we have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us. Of course, Sufi Aboutaleb, he's an economics consultant with the Egyptian cabinet.